Anyway, I know it's a little bit vague in some areas, but I think I've articulated at least some things sufficiently for you to understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that what if I was to try to summarize and make sure I understand you, right? I'm going to try to summarize in like bullet points. If I understand correctly,
Hmm.
you are against voluntaryism as such because you don't think that most people should have deciding power over how labor is organized, over how production is organized, um, and which particular goals the production of society is geared toward. And the reason you don't,
Yes.
okay, and the reason you don't want this to be the case, you don't want most people to have deciding power over their own productive activities and over, therefore, in aggregate, as a result of that, over the production of society as a whole, quote unquote, or distributively, perhaps the better term, is because you think most people are irrational and they don't know the best. They don't, when left alone, they don't organize their labor and their energies toward things that are um, appropriate.
Optimal from the perspective of need. They might be optimal from another perspective, from the perspective of desire. But I would quibble with one thing. Uh, It's not about people don't know what's in their own good. I don't necessarily believe in optimizing the good of everyone. Like there's, I would maybe discriminate between people as to whose good is prioritized. So I'm not an egalitarian. So that just to clarify. Yeah.
Hmm. And
It sounds like an immoral position. It's just not based on anything but like your subjective point of view. It's somehow in like it's kind of narcissistic for you to assume that there are people that are inferior to you.
dot girl power.
So
Um,
within your system, it feels like you're differentiating between superior people and inferior people, which is a
Right.
false premise.
that
All
I mean, that's
people
not
he
have
has
the
he has
projection.
99.9% of the
okay,
same
girl power.
genetics.
Shut
Okay,
the
do
So
you
fuck
the
up,
only
please.
can I please finish
No,
now?
no,
I was
no.
talking. It's
Be
my turn,
quiet.
right?
Shut up. No, no,
I was the one
no.
talking.
We
Please
don't
don't
interrupt
interrupt
you
me.
when you
Yeah,
speak.
no, no, you be quiet. I'm talking. I'm
Would you
responding.
just
would
mute
you like to
him?
hear
Well,
my
I'm
response?
gonna respond. Please listen to my words. So I think it's
I
a
mean, I can take
bullshit
you.
fucking
I can take you.
ideology. I'm
So I
talking
don't know why
about
you
your
are.
ideology, Flavia. Flavia, I'm responding to.
The reason I'm telling this other guy to shut up is because it's obvious that what he's saying is immoral. I already know it's immoral, and I already know that it's elitist. I'm aware that people like this exist. I'm trying to figure out his fundamental psychology. Telling him that what he's doing is immoral doesn't it'll make him shy away from telling me more. I want him to talk more. I want him to explain his psychology to me so I can understand it. This guy is doing a completely useless thing. There are people out there who want to control other people. The point is not to just like get mad and say, you're immoral. That's not useful. I'm trying to understand them so I can talk to them. Completely useless. Of course, what he's saying is immoral. It's obvious. If the depth of your analysis is that it's immoral, is that the depth of what you have to say? Gosh, so useless.
Yeah,
So
sorry. There was no way to like he was not stopping after making one point. He was sort of I don't know why. Anyway, I guess if he were willing to listen to my objection would be that he's not making it an actual objection. He's simply dogmatically asserting his like sort of preconception about egalitarianism. But anyway, like he's making a pronouncement, right? He's giving me his like when the Pope says ex cathedra, right? He defines a dogma of the church. That I feel like the epistemic status of what he was saying was just that. Anyway, but yeah.
he was issuing
Uh,
a papal bull, just decree
yeah, yeah,
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't disagree with what he's saying, but it's just the most obvious thing, right? Like, yes, I'm aware that you're asserting an elitist position. You said that. You already said that. You said,
yeah.
like, it's,
That's not a rejection. That's simply, he's simply saying boo, right? This is the way people argue against Iran and I guess even you, right? So probably that's the way they argue against everyone. I don't know why. Anyway,
yeah, I understood you're saying that you don't think many people should be allowed to decide because they don't go for what you think is the best. So I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to drill in and understand your psychology. I'm trying to understand why you think, what you would say is the appropriate way for, well, not, how do you say this? How do you define those people who are the best? So what you said. was that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think I heard you say that you want the productive energies of society to be geared towards the best interest of some group of people whom you define as being sort of the most deserving or the most worthy of, enjoying a good life or something like that. If I understood you correctly.
Basically, the people who have the capacity for the highest intellectual and aesthetic pleasures, basically.
Mhm.
Um,
And so
so
you
it is a kind of it is still a kind of hedonism. It's not like that distinct in terms of yes, it's still about satisfying desires. I'm not saying it's more objective than that. I'm just saying that I don't think all desires are created equal. So
and like,
I guess if you really want to reduce it to its most fundamental, I guess it reduces to a kind of utilitarianism. But the utilitarians had an argument among themselves, right? Bentham, on the one hand, was arguing that pinprick, pincushion is the same as I think poetry. He said, and then there were others who were saying no, they're not the same, right? So it basically reduces to that
mhm.
in a sense.
So now I have two arguments here. Again, now obviously I'm going to obviously we don't.
Oh, sorry. Can I add a point? And this is why actually the moral case is actually a little bit weaker for me than the like the economic case, because if you can economically show me, right, obviously that basically there will be no pressure on the group of people whose interests I'm worried about, then basically that they can always live comfortably in a capitalist society. I'm like the mode of production itself is simply a means to the optimal life for whoever can have an optimal life. So in a sense, we're coming from a closer motivation than it might appear at first glance.
Mhm. So, now I don't want to intrude in areas that you don't want to talk about, but obviously, for me
Yeah.
to understand how to optimize society for this group of people, I need to know what the attributes of this group of people is, right? How can I recognize one of these groups of people so I can understand why this dialectic materialist economy is better for this group of people than, say, a voluntarist, laissez-faire society, right? But you don't have to go there if you don't want to. Maybe that's pushing way too far into your psychology for you to tell me
No,
that.
I'm perfectly willing to get into it because actually my case does depend on psychology and sort of personal desire to some extent. So personal desire cannot be like what do you say? It cannot be quarantined, right? It cannot be sequestered. It cannot be sequestered away from my system, right? So I need to actually justify that. So um I have a vague sense here. I wish I had a more developed sense. So I apologize in advance that I don't have a more explicit kind of articulated understanding of this, even though like it's quite fundamental to my way of thinking. But basically, those so on the intellectual side of it, let's go with that. So on the intellectual and also the aesthetic side is also, although the aesthetic side is much better understood by modern philosophy, I don't know why, but the intellectual side, I don't know why it's neglected. So I think the quality of a person who has intellectual pleasures is that they for them theoretical understanding, like what many people call quote unquote descriptive. So not technical, not aimed towards some other goal, like not basically what I would call mind body, like split, as in the sheer act of understanding is one of their highest pleasures. So this would be the intellectual aspect of this group of humanity, as in I think intellectual pleasures. In a sense, I'm actually going back to I guess Plato and Aristotle in a sense. Like the intellectual pleasures are kind of almost a summum bonum, like basically the like the all other human activities almost like get their glory reflected from our intellectual capacity. And on the aesthetic side actually I don't think reduces to rationality like Ayn Rand thinks. I think there are aesthetic experiences that basically are primary, and you have a primary experience of, for example, I don't have a great appreciation for visual art, but I do have a great appreciation for music. So I have that capacity in my, I'm going to use soul in a kind of a figurative sense, but yeah, I have that capacity to appreciate music. And obviously, I cannot read the minds of other people, but I can, there's a certain level of intensity that I am 100% convinced is not universal. So there's a certain capacity in certain souls, figuratively speaking, for pleasures. The intellectual pleasures are actually demonstrable because you can see how much this person seeks understanding and the level of understanding and how specialized and how theoretical it is. So for me, the understand like the pursuit of theoretical knowledge and theoretical understanding is basically like a characteristic of those capable of intellectual pleasure. for aesthetic pleasure, I think people have dealt with it a lot. Like, you talk about Joyce and, like, Portrait of a Young Artist, like, and Wittgenstein, like, basically modern philosophers understand the aesthetic side because of this. Like, in the 20th century, basically they understood this completely. Like, aesthetics have their own kind of force, and, like, they're almost as valid. Like, they have it transcends politics, transcends ethics, transcends all kinds of things. But for the intellectual, theoretical side of things, I don't know why no one has affirmed the value of this. And it often gets knowledge often gets mixed up with efficiency and, like, technical knowledge and, like, ability to fend for yourself and ability to produce, which is not like not. I guess in the ancient world they had an appreciation for knowledge. That's why they had slavery, right? Because knowledge for its own sake, with someone else producing, basically. Yeah.
So if I was to propose three categories of aesthetic value or aesthetic experiences which are intrinsically valuable, I understand that you are saying that the first two are intellectual pursuit and intellectual satisfaction, and the second one is
Right.
art,
I, I would
consumption of.
stress theoretical because intellectual is it includes too many phenomena. I'm not taking as essential, or not essential, but I'm not taking as I consider them superfluous and extraneous. I think these are just the pressures of production. These are the pressures of the necessities of life. It's the contemplation for its own sake. Yeah.
Hmm. So you would say there are two. Sorry, you would affirm that there are two, and I would affirm that there are three. And let's see how this goes, right? So you would say it's a theoretical consumption of theoretical pursuits and achievement. Um,
Right.
you would also affirm that consumption of the arts and beauty as such is another one. This in the intellectual sense, right? Art and beauty.
Sorry, I got distracted for a second. Could you repeat the last sentence, if you don't mind? Sorry.
Consumption of art, consumption of beauty as
Right.
through the arts and so on, as an intellectual experience, as appreciated by the human mind. Um, and the third one I would say is quite literally physical pleasure. And I would put these three on the same sort of level, right? And in fact, I would actually demote the first one to being a means to an end rather than an end in itself. The theoretical knowledge, I would demote that to being a means to an end rather than an intrinsic end in itself. And in fact,
Right. Right.
technically, I would also demote the second one, the appreciation of art. I would call art aesthetic sampling. In other words, what people are doing when they produce art is they have a particular idea of an ideal environment. They have a vision for an ideal world, and let's say some ideal set of games or experiences to be had in that world. And so they depict these in art, whether through music or through story, fiction or whatever it
Right.
might be. They depict these, and then you read it and sample their ideal vision, their ideal world, and you pick out the
Right.
parts of it that you think are satisfactory. And then the goal there is to take those elements that you've sampled from someone else and try them out and see if you enjoy them as well. And of course, the experience there is to see whether experiences you got from someone else, those ideas are in fact pleasurable to you. So ultimately, all the other two that you promote very highly are, in my perspective, means, and the actual end is physical pleasure and the emotional quale of happiness. So I would just take happiness and physical pleasure as the top, as actual ends in themselves, and the things that you describe as ends, I would describe them as means. How do you respond to that?
I don't think I actually disagree because obviously the sort of motivation and the cash value to, I guess, smuggle in a. I don't mean it too literally, but the value is like, yes, the people who are motivated by theoretical, like, understanding and sort of that contemplation for its own sake, and also the aesthetic thing. I don't try to unify them because I don't know whether they're unified. I'm much more skeptical than you in terms of my system building, but yes, they do come out as pleasure, and that is why, I'm advocating for one group of people over another, right? Because I think their pleasures are higher in a quote unquote higher. I guess where we really disagree is that maybe you kind of consider, like, because yeah, it makes a lot of sense from your perspective. If pleasure is primary and pleasure is undifferentiated, then yes, the a capitalist society is ideal because you're basically producing all these commodities. Like you're producing more, I don't know, opportunities to party, let's say, or more opportunities to like I don't know, have more like more kinds of like whatever you think about soft drinks. Let's say soft drinks. More kinds of gadgets, more kinds of beautiful like cars, more kinds of chandeliers, etc. So I guess I have like a fundamental kind of revulsion towards and I mean I don't have a problem with quote unquote materialism, but certainly I do have a kind of suspicion of like I feel like it's a socially media. It's basically a corrupt influence from the lower. Like I don't know if you know Plato's Republic in any detail, but
Uh,
in Plato's Republic, like the elite class is actually banned from like actually the lower classes in Plato's Republic are allowed to have luxuries and private property and basically have an economic life, and the upper classes are banned from possessing luxuries and from possessing like sensual things, like things that give them sensual like kind of sense pleasures. Are
mhm.
you aware of this?
Yeah, I haven't read Plato directly, but I read summaries of him here and there, right? So,
Right, right.
what I would say, okay, so let me try and put
Plato,
forward a,
I think it's funny because Plato is actually the opposite of the USSR in a way. Like it's the common like who you would consider the commissars basically in Plato's Republic are actually meant to be maybe not poor, but they're meant to be fed and of course kept alive. But they're not meant to actually have they're not meant to have resources and luxuries of their own. They're meant to depend on the system. And actually the lower classes are allowed to have luxuries and wealth of their own. So yeah, Plato actually is the inverse of the USSR. It's kind of funny.
hmm, that's fine, that's fine. So I'm going to put forward a theory of value under capitalism and where it actually ultimately comes. And
Oh my god.
tell me if this helps you. Tell me if this how this strikes you. Okay, so
Right.
um, I affirm that everyone has some kind of an ideal vision of an ideal lifestyle for themselves and an ideal vision of themselves or whatever, right? And everyone is just kind of moving towards trying to make that vision real. In capitalism, they call it chasing a dream or whatever. And everyone wants to. This thing, this vision is compelling to each individual. It's the most compelling thing to each individual. And
Uh-huh.
if there's not, so
I'll have
they
to
want.
send
What?
a limit to the room. Unfortunately, this person cannot. Their connection is not stable. Anyway, limit.
Yeah. So,
Okay. Um. Yes.
for each person, that vision is the most compelling thing there is to them, and they want to make they want to make that real. And people talk about how when you lose your dreams, you lose everything. Life isn't worth living anymore, and so on. So, I have this theory on this notion of this compelling vision. Now, these visions, how do I say this? The reason why. So okay, you have your vision, and then you have your actual material circumstances, which really consist of your body, and then the environment around you, which you must use to sustain your body and then to build your vision. The environment around you consists of raw material, which you use to sustain your current body and to meet your desires. So you have your survival needs and then your other desires. Now, what makes things valuable to any person is that either they are necessary for survival in your current body, or they meet your they in some way fit into your need to um, build your ideal vision, that dream, right? And so capitalism, what makes one thing valuable or not valuable or whatever under capitalism is that ultimately that thing is valuable either for survival or for some person's dream. So tennis courts are valuable to those people who find it to be whose vision includes them enjoying the game of tennis. Um,
Right.
and or let's say I don't know, Kim Kardashian. Why does she sell? Well, because there are lots of women who part of their dream, their ideal vision of reality for themselves is that they are some kind of highly admired trophy. The world looks at them and thinks of them with awe of how beautiful they are and all that, and they live a glamorous
Basically,
lifestyle.
their sexual attractiveness is kind of exceptional, like not just exceptional, but like basically noteworthy. They're of noteworthy sexual appeal,
Yes, yeah,
like
yeah.
turn
So
heads.
yes, perfect. Trophy, right? Yeah, trophy value. And
Right.
so and these are also those desires, those
Whereas
dreams.
for most people, they want to be sexually attractive and sexually appealing, actually simply to form a relation, like a long term, like if if they're kind of monogamous and if they're not asexual, right? They want to get into a relationship, rather than it's not an end in itself to be sexually attractive for most people, I guess. Anyway, that's just that. Sorry, I'm dwelling on the example too much.
It's
My
fine.
bad. Yeah.
It's fine. So and then so you have your survival needs. Now, capitalism is just a system where either, as we talked about on the Crusoe example, you're on the island and you can you have to meet your immediate survival needs. So you pick the coconuts and you plant the wheat. That's survival. But then when he eventually stores away the wheat for the whole year and he has some time, he has some spare time now. What's he going to do with his spare time? He's going to do things that are not survival related in his spare time. He might play
Right.
tennis or he might do whatever, right? Now, so what I'm really pointing out here is that capitalism is a system where people they specialize in production so that they can produce what is required to enjoy their vision in the present to whatever extent that's possible, and then they they produce surplus in order to make the resources required to build the rest of their dream. So at each stage, people in steps they build parts of their dream, and they kind of build that progressively over time. Now, most
Within a
people,
limit at a given moment of time. So there are certain limitations at any given moment of time, but they're optimizing. They're optimizing at every moment. Oh, I mean, if they're using capitalism correctly, so that's yeah. But
yeah,
that's up to the individual basically to optimize or not to optimize.
yeah, well, not just optimizing ways to enjoy their current level of vision achievement, but also to achieve the rest of their vision, right? They want to achieve all of it.
Right, right. As
So,
in, if they plan accordingly, if they plan properly, yeah.
yes, and so now, for example, you find that there are a lot of things that most people share in common. There are some parts of there's some common things that are common to everyone's dream. For example, everyone wants to be immortal. Everyone wants to survive forever. So healthcare, for example, is in common demand. Um, and longevity research is in common demand. People want any kind of technology that will extend their lifespan, nutrition information, or whatever, various other kind of things people use. And people who don't do it the correct way, they do stupid things like they go for homeopathy or crystals or horoscopes or whatever, right? Just kind of different ways people think they can achieve immortality. And then there are the other,
Right.
right? So basically, capitalism is nothing more than a system where people produce enough to exchange with other people for the produce that those people have made, which is relevant to the subject's dream. And what you're doing is you're exchanging in the middle, where two people have things that meet each other's needs, each other's dreams in some way or other, either a survival need or a dream. Um, Now let's pause there. What do you think of this framework?
I mean, actually, this is not even a disagreement on the level of economic system. It's really a disagreement in terms of like actually whether I know you say you don't think man is a rational animal. You have a complex kind of essence to man. But my problem is that actually I would just dispute whether like even I would dispute my own rationality first of all, but also more primarily I would dispute the rationality of but this really is a question of anthropology, and it really would take specific like empirical arguments in terms of I don't know, maybe I would actually recommend like I would actually recommend books on the anthropology of religion, because it's really hard. This is not a point that can be argued. This is just a point that I feel like you either see empirically or you don't, because the way religion arises, like religion like basically Ayn Rand right said that religion is primitive philosophy, and I don't think that's the case. Like I think philosophy is basically a complete kind of what do you call it, like it's a complete kind of let's say perversion of human nature almost, if that makes sense. Like human nature I think is not to see the world like in terms of existence and what can be done to benefit yourself, but rather like a very kind of incoherent jumble of positive associations with things and negative associations with things, and that's why we have spirits, and we make a personality out of nature, because I don't think we have this kind of rational relation to nature at a fundamental level. Like we have it obviously in a more complex society after like a lot of kind of manipulation through education, but I don't think we have it in our ancestral state. So that's a very empirical point though. So it's very hard to argue
It's fine.
outside of yeah.
It's fine. So would you say that there are people who are rational who meet Aristotle's definition and Rand's definition, but you would say most people just don't meet that definition?
No, I would err on the side of saying no one is rational actually. If I like as in I'm in two minds about it, I'm not decided. But I would not err on the side of saying there are some rational people. I would err on the side of saying there are no rational people and basically, I just have this kind of fantasy that it's basically like some kind of like basically if everyone else is psychotic, there's a small group of people who are neurotic, if that makes sense. From the
Mm.
perspective of the hypothetical rational creature. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a very pessimistic it's a very pessimistic kind of yeah.
It's fine.
I cannot quote it right now, but there are books I would love to recommend on the anthropology of religion, and also from behavioral economics, and definitely if you read a lot, I would love to pick your mind on those claims. Right.
All right. So I'm just trying to run through some questions I have, if you don't mind terribly. So based on my description of sort of the way value arises under voluntaryism, um, what I'm kind of ultimately pushing at to try to see if I can pick your brain on this is so under this model, this notion of what makes things valuable, and sort of well, in this model, you would then find that um, the people who are most skilled at producing the resources, the values, the ideas, and the material values, so the mental values and the material values that enable them to build this dream they are the people who are what Ayn Rand would call, the heroes. And they have she called in the Fountainhead, she called it an unborrowed vision. It's quite literally unborrowed vision, referring to a dream, right? A dream that they take
Un-
seriously. Hmm?
Unborrowed, as in it is unborrowed, as in it is contained in their personality. It is contained in itself. It is not with reference to someone else's needs or desires or kind of maybe influence, but that's a different question. Okay.
Yeah, I don't agree with that it has to be unborrowed. I have no problem with multiple people sharing the same aesthetic
Yeah, okay.
sense. But
Right, right. You don't mind basically one person having a second-hand kind of vision. That's not a problem for you. Fair
yeah,
enough.
as long as it's what's compelling to him, and that's why we have aesthetic sampling, right? You sample art
It's
from
not.
other people
It's not a false
because
vision. It's not a false vision. Right. Sorry. My bad.
go on, sorry. It's
Well, I'm
not
saying
what?
it's not a false vision for you if it's borrowed. For Ayn Rand, I think it's almost a false vision if it's borrowed,
Yeah,
in a sense. Yeah.
and I would say that's wrong, right? Like the whole reason why art is supposed to be good is because it's how you sample other people's dreams, how you sample other people's unborrowed visions to try to augment your own. I read, let's say I read a manga, I read One Piece, and I liked the idea of, I don't know, some part of One Piece, and I picked that out and I added that to my dream, right? So that's totally fine. Um, so now
Mhm.
this is where I'm going to unavoidably antagonize you a little bit here. I've been very sort of unantagonistic so far, and I'm not doing this because I'm trying to actually be antagonistic. I'm doing this particular chain of inquiry that's coming up next is going to unavoidably do so, even though I'm trying not to. Okay, you okay with that?
Right. Right.
All right.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. You're like basically you're yeah. The facts of the case are basically are harsh. You're not being harsh because you're psychopathic. I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So now under the capitalist model, the people who are able to competently produce these visions, these dreams for themselves, their particular vision or dream are what I or Ayn Rand would call the heroes, the worthy people, the people whom society should be organized around. Someone like Elon Musk, I would say, is somebody whom society should be organized around. A person who has a dream and has you know the mental knowledge and the organizing skills and the connections and so on through whatever work he did to build those connections and so on. And you can disagree on whether or not that's meritorious or whatever. That's neither here nor there. The point is, he's a person who is skilled at building his dream, and that person is someone who is, in my or Ayn Rand's theory, he is a hero. He's a person who achieves. He's a person who moves forward, and he's the person who is worthy of living and able to live. Leonard Peikoff in Opa, the book that he writes to summarize Ayn Rand's philosophy, he defines
Yeah.
self-esteem as follows. He says that such people are able to say, I am capable of living, and I'm worthy of living. I, I,
Right.
I can achieve the best, and I deserve the best that I can achieve. That's something like that. And I would say that kind of person, is someone like Elon Musk, something like that, right? And I guess the fundamental aesthetic difference that drives you towards Marxism as opposed to voluntarism is basically that you disagree that people who are skilled at producing their aesthetic vision are the ones whom society should be organized around. People who are, in other words, people who are able to produce their aesthetic vision through voluntary activity by organizing, by convincing other people to voluntarily work on their vision. So someone like Elon Musk, he will sort of broadcast his vision to other people and convince them to join him on his vision. And by doing so, he's able to organize productive activities in his way by voluntarily convincing other people to join on his vision. See? And so there are all these different people who have an aesthetic vision in society, and they are able to convince other people to join them on producing that vision. And that's basically how they organize production in society. Um, and
By actually changing the means of them producing their own visions, right? So it's like a mutual exchange of they give you a greater ability to produce your vision because you're giving them in some way a greater ability to produce their vision. So it's a mutual like win-win, as I ran, and I guess as you would say,
yeah, yeah.
there's a win-win
And
relationship there.
so since I've described it to you this way, now it seems as if you had a sort of a notion of this already, but I don't know if you thought of it explicitly in this way. But since I've described it to you explicitly in this way, do you think that it's possible for you to prefer this system at any point, or would you prefer to still go with the Marxist system?
Right. The real issue I have here is that it depends on what your understanding of production is. Like, is your understanding of production that production is a rational, like to me, production is kind of this like it really depends on what you think the nature of mankind is, like as in production to me is related to our ancestral condition in which like basically a healthy human being would never do philosophy. A healthy human being would never never have a rationality. Basically a healthy human being would simply survive and produce and survive and produce. So the problem is that then we have basically just tragedy of a species. So that's why I was saying that I do accept the mind body split as Ayn Rand described it, even though for her it's an error. For me it's actually correct. That basically we have this tragedy of having evolved in order to produce and in order to survive, but at the same time having this kind of unfortunate byproduct of rationality. And now it turns out, yes, oh, the highest subjective experiences, right? The highest possible experiences are not of production, are not of our means of survival, but actually something that doesn't contribute to our survival. But I still then, but as a like as a self-respecting sort of as a person who I would commit suicide if I didn't think if I were ready to give up my what I think I need to have, which is that yes, I will pursue my rational pursuits and my sort of aesthetic pursuits even if they don't contribute to my survival, and therefore and in a sense sort of subjugate and like kind of bring under rational command the those things which make our survival possible, because I know that exists in abundance. Most people produce a means of survival and in very great quantities, but I want those quantities to be redirected not to those who produce the means of survival themselves, but to be distributed simply by need, ideally, in which case everyone would have positive utility. But if there's not enough to distribute it by need, then to be distributed to those capable of the highest rational and aesthetic pleasures.
Hmm. So so I didn't really antagonize you very much just now. I just sort of laid the
Little point.
yeah.
A little point. I don't believe in the concept of reward and reward. Like I don't think of anything as a just reward. I think of it as just resources to be exploited. So if people are producing those resources, I think, some people have a greater prior claim to it, especially if there's not especially if there's scarcity. If there's no scarcity, there's no conflict, right? But if there's scarcity, then I want the resources to go to the like, of course you want the people who produce survival to survive, so you need some resources to go back to them. But basically you want the resources to keep the thing that makes human life worth living. You want us to stay alive, whether we produce survival or not. We might contribute to survival, we might not, but certainly not at the level of capitalist producers, right? We're never going to do that, and I think it's not rational to even try.
Hmm. Can I ask a question real quick? Do you know pessimistic idealism?
By idealism, you mean big I, right? Like Berkeley or basically Plato. You don't mean idealism in the colloquial, like everyday sense, right? You mean idealism in the philosophical sense?
Yes, but I'm not talking like an ideology. I'm talking about a
For
person.
Schopenhauer, okay, never mind. I think that they use that. That was a term used for Schopenhauer, right? Basically.
Yeah, but I'm talking about a person right now. His Discord username is pessimistic idealism. Do you know that guy?
No, I don't know him.
Okay, thank
Whoever
you. I
that
was
is.
just trying to see if there's a link there. No offense or anything. Okay. So,
Yeah, if I my sick ideas are my I'm joking. I don't think my ideas are sick, but I don't have the same problem as Ayn Rand in terms of making fun of it. Like Ayn Rand had a big problem with that, I know. But yeah.
it's fine. So, yeah. So now I'm going to actually draw and antagonize you a little bit. Again, the goal here is not actually to antagonize you. I'm not actually trying to like pass judgment. I'm just trying to like figure out the question itself, sort of on an like I can't get any way. There's no other way to ask it, right? So,
Right. There's non-harsh way of, yeah, I understand.
so in the voluntarist system, the people who qualify as worthy, so to speak, are those who are able to voluntarily convince other people to join them in producing their vision. Because you
Right.
could you could theorize then that the fact that these people were able to convince other people voluntarily to subscribe to their vision is prima facie evidence that that vision is worth pursuing. Right? For those people whom they have managed to convince, that vision is worth pursuing to those people. And that just sort of seems to justify itself, right? To those people and to everyone involved, and there's like no issue there, right? Now, what I understand is the planned economy model is probably a little bit different. It's like you're saying, well, irrespective of what vision people are willing to buy into, um, they are,
Well, no, I don't necessarily believe in convincing people. If you have enough force, use force. But it's just that's just a question of tactics at that point. I don't. I'm not. I don't have any principled stance in terms of coercion versus cooperation and persuasion. Yeah, I don't believe reason. Basically, I don't believe reason is a tool of cooperation or of harmony or of justice. Reason and society are, they're like east and west. They never meet. Society is never rational, in my view.
it's fine. So, rather, what I'm trying to get at is I'm saying, um, wi- if I was to say that the fact that you have to use force to try to get people on board with your vision for the particular goals that production should be pursuing, the particular goals that production should be organized around, if you have to convince people by force to buy into that, that sort of says that perhaps that vision is not actually worthy. And it seems as if you were trying to say that there are worthy goals, worthwhile and worthy goals, which people don't buy into voluntarily, and so they must be made to buy into them, right? And I guess what I'm saying as well, the proof that something is a worthy goal, a worthy vision, is that people buy into it voluntarily. And so
Right.
this sort of fundamental theory of what is worthy of production efforts, maybe it seems to be the fundamental area where we depart from each other. And I'm trying to sort of see what you have to say to that. Would you say that I would look at this and I would say, well, the fact that you can't convince enough people to organize around whatever goal it is that you think is best, um, you can't do that voluntarily is prima facie evidence that it's not necessarily best. Well, there's no other way I can say it. I try to think of it. You know.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing I guess I would point out there is that simply that I don't think in a capitalist society either that people are actually being convinced, because you do have private property rights, right? You have this system where people are autonomous, produce autonomously, and someone else cannot come and use their. Although I know you have a theory of commandeering for basic needs, but I mean to say in terms of pursuing your ideal, you cannot simply use whatever's available in the universe, right? You're restricted to things which are not claimed by other autonomous producers. So I don't know. In the capitalist system, also you have a level of action and a level of policy which is not agreed on, right? Because I don't agree with like anyone's use of their private property, right? I think their private property should be used in this way rather than that way, right? So ultimately, there's always a level of disregarding people's desires under certain conditions, right?
Hmm.
Like we're not, both of us I think don't believe that everyone can get whatever they want, because uh people have contradictory desires, right? So obviously you're not that's not going to be our model, right, for
I do
anyone.
believe that actually. I do believe that. I think everyone can get what they want. Um,
Right. I
meaning,
guess, yeah, I guess to be fair, communism is my model of that, right? In that, yes, it is possible that we can produce enough resources for everyone that no one has to be exploited. And I guess you have an idea that capitalism is not exploitation, so you think that too. But for me, it's not a tragedy if people have to be exploited. But then that would make me not a communist anymore, but rather, basically a belief in like a kind of aristocratic totalitarianism, right? With a philosopher king and so on. So yeah, yeah. So actually, that's the thing. That's whether you have a tragic view or whether you have like whether you have a perfectionist view. But that also depends on your understanding of society and of human nature. So that would actually bring us to different questions completely
hmm.
from economics and politics. Yeah.
Well, I don't actually think this has not been an anthropological discussion at all. It's been a psychological. We've just been discussing different psychologies and different sort of understandings of how your dreams, your aspirations can be met, and which form of organization can meet your aspirations. Um,
Right. I know, but the point is the anthropological thing comes in where when if you whether you acknowledge that human beings operate by goal direction, or whether they operate actually by nothing, as in not cognitively. So that's the real claim, that actually human action is not mostly cognitive, and societies appear to be it's like an anthill, right, basically, or like a beehive, as in there is no goal directed action. It's just apparent, and the whole thing is actually just the emergent phenomenon of various kind of um, instincts for material pleasure, and for like for status and for like social brownie points, basically. So that's a much bigger claim, and obviously I cannot argue for it because it's empirical. Yeah.
that's fine. So I'm going to try to to apply an argument that I think is going to potentially convert you. So now that I think I understand your model, the way you view the world with respect to dreams and aspirations, what you want out of life, I think I may be able to actually give you an argument that would possibly convince you now. Let's try and see how that works, okay? All
Okay.
right. So now basically I think your frustration, well, the issue that you're expressing frustration with is that you are born into this world and you have these capitals that you're given, this default human capital of your mind and your hands, but that's not enough to be able to jump into the world and operate with the capitals that are available as produced by other people. And other people don't want to let you use their capitals however you want to use them, right? You might want to do this with their capitals and you might want to do that with their capitals. And so there's this kind of tension that you have where you want to jump in and you want to immediately command these capitals and use them the way that you deem best, and you won't be allowed to do that. And then, well, you talk to capitalists and they tell you, well, why don't you just take your time, and it'll take you 30 to 40 years, but you will eventually have built the capitals required. And now, over the next 20 years, when you're between your 40s and your 60s, you'll be able to, build your own business and start building that vision, and you'll be able to enjoy it in the last years of your life. But the first 20 to 30 years of your life will be spent building the capital required to do that. And I guess you would say that's not a life worth living. It takes too long, right? Is that ultimately kind of what you would respond with if you were told that you could just build it over 30 years and then enjoy it later on?
Actually, I have no specific response to that. I'd have to think about it, but carry on. Like these are novel. They're not completely novel, obviously, but there are some novel aspects to it. So I'm basically I want to give it its due and think about it as a novel thing. So I think about it, like think about it rigorously and sort of carefully, and understand all your terms, and basically give you my verdict after I've thought about it properly.
No, no, no.
So, is there any other aspect to it? So one is you think it's the delayed, like basically I have this limbo period for so long before I actually get to live life, as
Before
maybe I might desire. So you think that might be behind my frustration, and then is there anything else to
before you
add to
get
that?
to, it's a waiting period or a limbo period, as you said, before you have accrued the capitals required to do the things you actually want to do with your time. And so it's
Right.
kind of frustrating in that respect. There's this long waiting time. And I agree, it's can be frustrating. Um, so, okay, you didn't have a response because I'm a bit surprised to hear that you never thought of it that way, right? So that baked into what I said just now is the assumption that there is a place in society that is in fact doing what you want, or rather, even if there isn't, there is a way for you to build that capital to do that new thing that you want to do. If it's really true, like okay, Elon Musk wants to go to Mars, and so he had to spend a long time building capital. He first had to learn software development and computer programming so that he could build PayPal, so that he could sell it, so that he could build other companies, and so that he could do all. And it's been a whole journey of doing different things he didn't really care much about, but eventually he's now at the stage where he can do SpaceX. And even while he's doing SpaceX, he's forced to do things he doesn't actually care about, like the underground tunnel thing that is probably going to fail, or whatever other ventures, like he's building the robots and the self-driving cars and stuff. He doesn't really care about those. He wants to get to Mars. But all these other things are things that are like that waiting time, that limbo stuff he doesn't actually fucking care about. But he has to build the
They're like
capital.
the chores, they're like the chores
Yeah,
proverbial house, I guess. Yeah, fair enough.
yeah. And it's like he's doing something completely new that so he came into the world with his mind and his hands and nothing else, sort of. He had some boosting. Okay, great. But you kind of getting the point I'm trying to make, right? He had his mind and
I
hands
don't,
and
wait, don't I don't know. This is not authentically Mars. Like in order like to point at inheritance and things like that. Like basically the capitalist idea or Iron's idea, your ideas are basically completely correct about that. Like capitalism is a very demanding system. Like being rich actually doesn't get you very far. You actually have to you actually have to care about investing, and you actually have to be talented to succeed. Like it's not being rich is not enough. I don't know why people have this idea that basically rich people are like the rich are in a very bad position in capitalism, as in compared to feudalism. They always have to compete in order to survive. But yeah.
so yeah, so basically, he does all these things that are unrelated so that he can do the thing that he actually wants to do. And so that's the first thing. And baked into that, this claim I'm making is basically I'm claiming that if you put in the time um, to build consumption capitals and fixed capitals that you can set aside and cash in on 10 years down the line, then 10 years down the line, when you cash in on those, you'll be able to do what you want. Um,
Mhm.
so now
Right.
that's one thing. And the second thing is something along the lines of even okay, so that first scenario is for people like Elon Musk whose dream involves doing something that no one else was doing. So there was no pre-existing capitals in society that were already allocated to doing the thing he wants to do. He had to build the new capitals to do the thing he wants to do. It's completely new stuff that he's building. Now, what about someone who wants to do something that is already being done in society? Let's say somebody who wants to, I don't know, work on longevity research, or who wants to work on curing cancer or something. Now you can't just jump up and do that, right? So you're not born with like a lab, so a lab and a bunch of chemicals and a bunch of like patients and stuff to work on. So you need to commandeer. You need to
Doctoral
sorry.
doctoral students, yeah, like you need to get that from existing resources. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
what you need is access to other people's capital, and you need to convince them to do it the way you want them to do it with their capitals. And so, really, what you do is you end up kind of joining some organization at the bottom and having to work your way up, right, until you kind of command other people's capitals by being in a position in a company or something where you are given deciding power over those capitals, and then you can direct those capitals in the direction you want. And that takes time as well. There's this leading time again. You can eventually get there. You will eventually get to do what you want after like a 20-year career, climbing, doing, moving from this company to that company, or accepting a new job offer to do something slightly different or whatever. And so that's kind of one way. That's another way. So it's like the point is, all of these dreams are available to you. I guess you just have to, either build the capitals yourself by first doing things you don't want to do, or join an organization that is doing what you want to do, but join at a lower level of that organization where you won't get to do it the way you want to do it. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, the problem having there is that like you're conceptualizing it as a kind of, means ends kind of thing, like a very rational process, and that might be true for the individual entrepreneur. But the whole thing depends on the mass irrationality of people. Like it's because other people are irrational that their labor is available for you to use. Like they have religions, they have their families are mutually exploited. Like they manipulate each other. They're liars. They're like um, we would not have a labor force without people being that way, because if those people were also rational, they would never be useful. They would never be useful input into your system. So what you are actually not producing, when Elizabeth Warren says, or I don't know, Obama, whatever, they say you do not make that. They're right in one way and they're wrong in one way. They're right in that yes, you need to depend basically on the irrationality of the mass of men in order to produce in this way. And second, they're wrong because yes, those men could not have produced anything on their own. They need the organizing talent, or not just the organizing talent, but they need the rational vision, basically, of the entrepreneur. My problem is that the entrepreneur in the capitalist system does not acknowledge his dependence on human irrationality, whereas I do, and I see the mass of human labor and the mass of human human the human bodies. I see human bodies as a kind of hydroelectric dam runs on a waterfall or something. So that's the way it is. It's not something. It's not some kind of beautiful harmonious vision of exchange. It's actually you're simply putting a turbine under the waterfall. The capitalist is doing this, and I also want to do this. But the difference is that capitalist is then kind of like pandering to the waterfall itself, and kind of saying, oh yeah, you will you're free to buy this, and you're free to buy that, and you're free to you're free to bid up the prices of products. You're free to give your family expensive gifts. You're free to buy diamond rings, and this is all kind of very disgusting to me. Like you should use the waterfall to the extent you need to, and basically try to keep it happy at the minimum. And there's no reason to waste resources in that way. And basically free yourself from labor. Like Elon Musk, to the extent he's a rational person who can have intellectual and aesthetic pleasures, is wasting his life. Is wasting his life, wasting the majority of his waking day in unnecessary labor, because he buys into the system of mutually satisfying the desires of people. Whereas if their desires are expended with, we would have to produce at a much lower level, or no, maybe not at a much lower level, but in a completely different way, where we're not producing simply to expand production as efficiently as possible. But I don't know. This is almost repetitive, so I don't know whether it's even worth. This just goes back to the original point.
I know. I
In terms of
understand that. I understand that I sound as if I'm not understanding what you're saying, but I understand. I promise I understand what you're saying, but I'm just trying to clarify elements of what it sounds to me like you're saying to ensure that I'm understanding properly. Like I'm proposing scenarios to see whether you would assent to the voluntary system under these conditions. See, and I'm trying to see.
so to boil down my latest point to its essential, it's that I don't see the distinction between like the difference between Elon Musk and sort of I guess like a communist commissar or a philosopher king, is that Elon Musk is not seeing people's labor as a resource, right? He's kind of seeing it as an autonomous decision and an exchange, but actually in effect it's a resource, because people are not rational. They are basically like Marxists would call this mystification. So basically, it's their religion, it's their family, it's these kinds of things. They're not actually making a rational decision to work for you. You're basically, your production is on borrowed irrationality. Your production goals might be rational, the entrepreneur might be rational technically, but actually his whole system is rendered irrational by the evasion that he has in terms of his dependence on the irrationality of man for his system. I depend on the irrationality of man too, but openly, and I will treat the labor accordingly, right? I don't treat it with dignity or with autonomy. And obviously, you don't have to abuse it, but you don't have to abuse animals either, right? But you can be humane towards animals, but you don't have to invent fictions about rights and about dignity and about some kind of voluntary exchange. No, it should not be voluntary,
Mm.
because that would be an injustice. An injustice is not about what you like. An injustice is not just a harm to one person, but an injustice can also be a failure to fulfill a negative duty towards someone. So if someone deserves a certain amount of control over some resource or over someone else, over an animal, whatever it is, and denying them that level of control is a form of injustice to
Hmm.
me.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I'm just, again, it seems as if I didn't understand what you said, but I understood what you said. The reason I'm continuing to press these scenarios with you is to see
Yeah.
whether it's possible. No, I'm not claiming that I'm not trying to say that I think you haven't thought it through, but rather I'm trying to see, there are elements that are implicit in there that you may not have made explicit. And maybe if these scenarios make something explicit, you might end up agreeing with the voluntarist system, with even though you didn't before. Or rather, you might concede that under specific conditions you would agree with the voluntarist system, and that is useful to me because it tells me how to try, how I can get through to people with your psychology, right? Because
Mm.
to me the utility here is I see somebody who has a different psychology and a different aesthetic profile, and I need to convince this kind of person in the future. So right, so uh, so now what I understood it to mean is, so you don't see people as being rational and so on, and the system is irrational because there are these irrational elements whom you have to manipulate. Okay, fine. Now consider the following though. If you, even let's say you continue to see that the voluntary system is irrational, however, you realize that there's a way for you to work with this irrational system and get what you want. Even though you will have to live as Elon Musk, you will have to negotiate with the waterfall. But you can in fact get what you want, right? It's just going to take a little longer. um you're okay with that, or you're not okay with that?
Um. Uh, as I told you, this is like a novel. I mean, yes, I've thought about this, but not. I haven't focused on this question. So you can get. I'm not 100% sure whether you're getting what you want or whether your desires themselves are kind of molded by pressure of the pressure of your limitations in this case, if that makes sense. So does that make sense? I don't.
It's fine. There was another
Although
question.
the problem with that is that, oh yeah, how can you demonstrate that these would have been your desires in a counterfactual, right? So that's maybe I cannot rely on counterfactual desires. Uh, and why do counterfactual desires have any validity in my system anyway, right? Our system is about the world, is about the real world, right? It's about facts, not about counterfactual. So I don't know. I have to think about that. I'm not ready to give you like a rational response on that. I have to think about it. Yeah.
It's fine. I'll try one or two kind of last kind of modifications and see if
See, on a practical level, obviously that's how I live, right?
Mhm.
As long as the system exists, I try to get what I can out of it, right? So, but you're saying that is not just something to do because as a compromise. It's actually not a compromise. It's actually a good thing.
Yes.
So basically, I do what you're advocating, but I see it as a compromise and as a kind of like regrettable thing, right? Something like basically unfortunate circumstance, and you see it not as that. So that's the but I have to think about it in order to I don't have a firm view on that.
Okay, can I say one last kind of thing there? So this has helped me to also kind of come up with a new identification. So it's helped me a lot. So what I realized here is you have people who want to pursue a particular aesthetic vision, and they don't have available at their fingertips the capitals to pursue that vision. So there are several ways to go about making that a reality. The first is to either work really hard like a mule for 20 years and then build the capitals and pursue it later on. Like we talked about that. Another way is to enter some hierarchy, which is doing the thing that you want to do, and then redirect that hierarchy to use it the way you want it to be used, to use the capitals the way you want them to be used. Another way is to produce art, to produce a representation of what you think is the correct way to use those capitals, and then publish that art widely. And if people buy into that art, then they will voluntarily, of their own will, they will reorganize their own productive energies and their own productive activities to producing the thing that you've depicted in your art. Um,
Hmm.
so that's another way people influence the world, right? Through art. They put out a vision, and people, if they buy into that vision, they begin to reorganize the world around the vision that was produced in that art. So you can do that in music, you can do it in poetry, and in fiction, in manga, and whatever else. You can also do that in philosophy and stuff like that. And so, um, one way to live your life um, for the vision that you want, even though society isn't currently organized to pursue that vision, is through art. And you can that's another way to do it. How would you feel about living a life where you produce art or philosophy or something like that? Even though you aren't going to be paid very highly or whatever, ultimately what you will get to see through your art, through your work, is you'll get to see your customers, the people who buy into your vision, they will begin to sort of tell you, oh, this resonates with me. Oh, this made me change the way I live my life. Oh, this made me do this and that and that. And over the, let's say, the next 20 or 30 years, you will see changes in particular people whom you can then influence. And the payoff there is that you will see your vision growing through other people. How do you feel about that as another way to, you know, get what you want?
I mean, I think I already live that on a smaller scale. It doesn't happen to be fiction. It happens to be, sort of, mm, I guess, explicit philosophy as such.
Mhm.
I guess my main problem there is actually, in that case, it might actually be more venal than I'm describing, because it might just be a question of status. Then in that case, like you just want kind of want you want social acceptance of the primacy of this kind of activity, whereas yeah, that might actually be superficial and like superfluous. I'll have to think about that as well. Um, I don't know. Yeah, because I guess if survival is taken care of, then what is your complaint at that point? That is an interesting question. Yeah, I'd have to think about that.
Okay. So if you feel like coming back, and or maybe if I see you around or whatever, and I try
Right.
to talk to you about this, let's see how that goes. If you come up with any conclusions with respect to whether or not I've been able to convince you that maybe the voluntary approach is better than the forced approach to get into organizing people's labor. And that's basically
Right.
what we're kind of negotiating around here. Right? I'm trying to see if I can get you to
Right.
think that the voluntary approach is better than the forced approach.
And we haven't discussed this very much, but in terms of keeping people happy, like there is a, like for example, as you might know, the NHS is running out of money, so there's a lot of problems with capitalism even on that level, which I'm not sure how to solve. Because obviously, if you can keep people happy, in a very basic way, then you can kind of carry on with what you want to do. So there's some problems on that level too. But we didn't get to that. We didn't talk on that level, but maybe we might one day. So that's great. Thank you.
No
That's
problem.
very helpful and very thought provoking. Okay, talk to you another.
All right. Bye.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you as well. Thank you.
I don't know if I see things like this. They never work the way I think they will, but I learned a lot from here. The fuck are you talking about? What?